Your mother's inability to truly love you isn't your fault. Carl Jung discovered this devastating truth over a century ago when he identified what he called the maternal complex. What he found explains why narcissistic mothers are psychologically incapable of genuine love. And by the end of this video, you'll finally understand why nothing you did could have ever been enough, and more importantly, how to break free from this invisible prison. Maybe you've spent your entire life trying to earn your mother's approval. Perhaps you've noticed how your achievements are only valuable when they reflect well on her. Or you might be asking yourself why, despite your success in other areas of life, you still feel that gnawing emptiness inside when you think about your relationship with her. You might recognize that feeling when your stomach tightens before calling her. The way you rehearse conversations in your head, trying to predict her reactions. How you've learned to edit your life story when sharing it with her, carefully omitting parts that might trigger her disapproval, or worse, her indifference. This isn't just your experience. Millions of people worldwide struggle with the aftermath of being raised by narcissistic mothers, and conventional psychology often focuses only on managing symptoms rather than understanding the root cause. The effects follow you everywhere, into your romantic relationships, where you might find yourself attracted to emotionally unavailable partners, into your friendships, where you might struggle to believe people genuinely care about you, even into your career, where no achievement ever feels quite good enough. But what if I told you that Carl Jung solved this exact psychological puzzle almost a century ago? His approach doesn't just help you understand why your narcissistic mother can't love you. It gives you the tools to finally free yourself from waiting for a love that will never come in the form you've been seeking it. His insights reveal why the woman who gave you life may never be able to give you the emotional nourishment you've been craving, and why that's not a reflection of your worth. In the 1920s and 30s, Jung observed patterns in his patients who had been raised by mothers with what we would now identify as narcissistic traits. He saw that these mothers created a specific psychological wound in their children, which modern psychology would later recognize as core features of attachment trauma and developmental trauma. One of Jung's patients, whom he described in his writings, was a successful businessman who could never maintain intimate relationships. Despite his professional achievements, he felt hollow inside. Through analysis, Jung discovered that this man's mother had used him as an emotional substitute for her distant husband, praising him only when he fulfilled her emotional needs. This pattern created what Jung called a provisional life. A life never fully lived because the individual remains psychologically tethered to the mother. Today, we call this narcissistic abuse or narcissistic parenting. But Jung's approach goes deeper than contemporary therapy because it doesn't just identify the pattern, it explains why narcissistic mothers are fundamentally incapable of providing the love their children need, and more importantly, how this understanding can set you free from the endless cycle of seeking what can never be given. Jung's first crucial insight was what he called the mother complex. Now, I know this sounds like academic jargon, but imagine your psyche as a beautiful house with many rooms. In a healthy development, the mother helps furnish these rooms with self-worth, emotional regulation, and a sense of being loved for who you are. But the narcissistic mother creates a very different kind of internal architecture. Instead of a solid foundation, she builds rooms that only reflect her needs, her desires, and her image. Think about it. Do you recognize these rooms in your internal house? The room where you display your achievements, not for your satisfaction, but because they might finally earn her approval. The room where you hide parts of yourself that she deemed unacceptable. The room where you keep all the unmet needs for comfort, validation, and unconditional acceptance. The narcissistic mother, according to Jung, has a fundamental wound in her own psyche. She herself was likely raised with conditional love or no love at all. But instead of healing this wound, she creates what Jung called a false self, a perfect, grandiose image of herself that requires constant maintenance and validation. This is where you come in. For the narcissistic mother, you aren't a separate person with your own needs and identity. You're an extension of her false self, a mirror that must reflect back her perfection. When you succeed, it's her success. When you fail, it's a personal attack on her image. Consider how this might have manifested in your childhood. Perhaps she dressed you in ways that brought her compliments rather than considering your comfort. Maybe she pushed you toward activities that enhanced her social standing, regardless of your interests. Or possibly she shared your personal struggles with others to gain sympathy for herself as the devoted mother dealing with a difficult child. Okay, I need you to stay with me here because what I'm about to share might be difficult to accept, but it's the key to your freedom. This next part explains why you've never been able to earn your mother's love, no matter how hard you tried. Jung's second insight was even more profound. He discovered that narcissistic mothers aren't simply choosing not to love their children. They are psychologically incapable of the kind of love a child needs. To understand this, imagine love as water in a well. In order to draw water for someone else, the well needs to have water in it. The narcissistic mother's well is empty, not because she's evil, but because it was never filled for her. She cannot give what she does not possess. This explains those confusing moments when she seemed to care for you when you were sick, but made your illness about her worry and her sleepless nights. Or how she could attend your events, but somehow made your performance about her excellent parenting. Or perhaps how she could buy you gifts, but they were things she wanted you to have rather than what you actually desired. What looks like love from a narcissistic mother is actually something else entirely. Jung would call it narcissistic supply. The validation, attention, and emotional energy she extracts from you to maintain her false self. It feels like love to her, but it's actually the opposite. It's taking, not giving. This explains the confusing hot and cold dynamic you might have experienced. When you're fulfilling her needs for admiration and validation, she seems loving. But the moment you assert independence or fail to reflect her perfect image, that love disappears. That's because it was never love to begin with. It was narcissistic supply dressed up as affection. Think about those moments when you shared good news and her first response was how it reflected on her. Or when your distress was met with irritation rather than comfort. Or perhaps how your achievements were only celebrated if they aligned with her values, while accomplishments outside her narrow vision were dismissed or diminished. Jung noted that true love involves seeing the other person as separate and whole. The narcissistic mother is incapable of this fundamental act of recognition. She sees you as an extension of herself, a character in her story, not the author of your own. This next part explains the most painful aspect of the mother-child relationship with a narcissist. Take a deep breath because understanding this will change everything about how you see your childhood. Jung's third insight involves what he called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject or refuse to acknowledge. For the narcissistic mother, the shadow contains all her insecurities, flaws, and vulnerabilities, everything that contradicts her perfect self-image. Instead of integrating these aspects, the narcissistic mother projects them onto others, especially her children. This explains why narcissistic mothers often treat one child as the golden child and another as the scapegoat. You might recognize this if you grew up with siblings and noticed the dramatic difference in how your mother treated each of you. Or perhaps you experienced being the golden child when you complied with her needs, only to become the scapegoat when you began to individuate or express needs of your own. Imagine a puppet master controlling marionettes on a stage. The narcissistic mother is the puppet master, and her children are the marionettes. The golden child puppet performs the role of perfection, validating the mother's false self. The scapegoat puppet carries all the mother's projected flaws and failures. This dynamic can create intense confusion. You might have moments where you feel intensely loved, followed by devastating rejection, sometimes within the same day or even the same conversation. This inconsistency isn't just hurtful, it's psychologically destabilizing. As one of my clients described it, it was like living with Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde. I never knew which mother I'd get. Neither puppet is seen for who they really are. The golden child isn't loved for their true self, but for how well they perform their assigned role. The scapegoat isn't hated for who they are, but for carrying all the qualities the mother cannot accept in herself. This is why the roles can sometimes switch. When the golden child asserts independence or fails to perform perfectly, they can suddenly find themselves cast as the scapegoat. The puppeteer simply reassigns the roles based on which child is currently better at meeting her needs. Jung recognized that this projection makes genuine love impossible. To love someone, you must see them as they are, not as a screen for your own projections. The narcissistic mother cannot do this. Her projections are too powerful, her need for them too great. I know this is getting deep already. Let me give you a moment to process this. What Jung discovered is profound, and it's going to challenge everything you thought you knew about your relationship with your mother. Are you ready for the final revelation? Jung's fourth insight involves what he called archetypes, universal patterns in the collective unconscious. The mother archetype is one of the most powerful, representing nurturing, unconditional love, protection, and the source of life itself. But in the case of the narcissistic mother, this archetype becomes distorted. Instead of embodying nurturing and unconditional love, she embodies control, conditional approval, and emotional vampirism. Think of your psychological development as a garden. The archetypal mother is meant to provide rich soil, consistent watering, and the right conditions for your authentic self to grow. The narcissistic mother, however, creates a garden without proper nutrients. She may water it occasionally, but only to grow plants that she prefers, in arrangements that make her look good to others. You might recognize this if you were only praised for certain qualities while other authentic parts of you were ignored or criticized. Perhaps you were the smart one, or the pretty one, or the athletic one, reduced to a single quality that served your mother's image, while the rest of your personality was treated as irrelevant or problematic. This distortion of the mother archetype creates what Jung called a complex, a cluster of emotionally charged associations that continues to affect you throughout life. The mother complex formed from a narcissistic mother typically includes deep feelings of unworthiness that persist despite external success, difficulty trusting others, especially authority figures, fear of abandonment that can be triggered in intimate relationships, perfectionism that never allows you to feel satisfied with your people-pleasing behaviors that leave you feeling resentful and depleted, difficulty identifying your own needs and desires apart from what others expect. Think about how these patterns might show up in your life. Do you find yourself exhausted from trying to anticipate others' needs? Do you feel panic when someone is displeased with you? Do you struggle to answer simple questions about your preferences, often defaulting to, "I don't mind," or "whatever you want"? Jung believed that understanding this complex was the first step toward healing. By recognizing that your mother's inability to love you wasn't about your worthiness, but about her psychological limitations, you begin the process of what he called individuation, becoming your whole, authentic self, separate from your mother's projections. Now, I know this has been a lot to take in. Jung's insights can feel overwhelming at first, because they're so much deeper than what we usually hear about narcissistic parents. But this depth is exactly what's going to set you free. Are you ready to learn how? Now let's talk about what you can actually do with this understanding. Jung didn't just identify the problem. He provided a path toward healing through what he called individuation. These practices may seem simple, but they address profound psychological patterns. Step 1. The next time you achieve something, pay attention to your immediate thoughts. If you hear, "What will mum think?" or "This isn't good enough," pause and ask, "Is this my voice or hers?" Write down your authentic feelings about your achievement in a journal, using only "I" statements. When making a decision, even something as small as choosing what to eat for dinner, notice if you feel an urge to choose what would please your mother. Take a moment to ask yourself, what do I actually want? This simple practice begins to strengthen your authentic voice. The key is consistency. Don't try to silence her voice completely at first. Just practice distinguishing it from yours. Step 2. Make a list of 3 qualities your mother criticized in you, like sensitivity, creativity, or independence. Choose just one this week. If she criticized your sensitivity, allow yourself to cry during a movie. If it was your creativity, spend 10 minutes doodling without judgment. If your mother treated anger as unacceptable, give yourself permission to feel angry about something small in a safe environment. Maybe it's a movie character's actions or a news story. Notice the physical sensations of anger without judging them. This helps reclaim a natural emotion that may have been forbidden. The key is self-compassion. Don't try to embrace everything at once. Start with small moments of permission. Step 3. Create a simple morning ritual where you place your hand on your heart and say, "I see you, I value you, and I'm here for you." Do this for just 30 seconds before checking your phone in the morning. As you say these words, imagine speaking to your younger self with the nurturing presence you deserved. When you're feeling overwhelmed or distressed, ask yourself, what would a loving mother do right now? Maybe it's making a cup of tea, wrapping yourself in a soft blanket, or speaking kind words. Perform this small act of mothering for yourself, even if it feels awkward at first. The key is consistency, not duration. Even 30 seconds of genuine self-mothering daily can begin to heal the maternal wound. Step 4. The next time you feel an intense reaction to someone's criticism, especially a female authority figure, pause and say to yourself, "This is my mother complex being activated." Then take 3 deep breaths before responding. Notice how this small space changes your reaction. Create a dialogue with your mother complex. When you notice perfectionist thoughts or people-pleasing behaviors, write down what this part of you is afraid will happen if you don't meet expectations. Then respond with compassion, as you would to a frightened child. This dialogue helps integrate the complex rather than fighting against it. The key is awareness, not perfection. Simply naming the complex when it's activated begins to reduce its power. Step 5. Set aside 10 minutes in a private space. Write a letter to the mother you needed, not the one you had. Describe what you needed from her that you never received. Allow yourself to feel the sadness of this loss without rushing to positive thinking. This grief work is essential for moving forward. Create a small symbolic ritual to honor this grief. Perhaps light a candle, listen to a meaningful song, or spend a few minutes in nature. Acknowledging the reality of your loss is not dwelling in victimhood, it's honoring your experience with truth. The key is allowing the grief without getting stuck in it. Grief flows when acknowledged and tends to stagnate when denied. Start today by choosing just one of these micro-practices. This week, do it daily, even if only for a minute. Over the next month, you can add another practice, but don't overwhelm yourself. Jung emphasized that individuation is a lifelong journey, not a quick fix. So, what did Jung teach us about narcissistic mothers and their inability to love? 3 devastating insights. First, the narcissistic mother is psychologically incapable of seeing you as separate from her, making true love impossible. Second, what appears as love is actually narcissistic supply, a transaction, not a gift. And most importantly, no amount of achievement, perfection, or pleasing could have ever earned her love because the problem was never you, it was her empty well. This is why Jung's approach succeeds where conventional therapy often falls short. While conventional approaches might focus on managing your symptoms or improving communication with your mother, Jung's approach addresses the root cause, the fundamental distortion in the relationship and how it shaped your psyche. It doesn't ask you to manage an impossible relationship better. It frees you from the expectation that the relationship could ever be healthy. When you apply Jung's insights to your relationship with your narcissistic mother, you don't just cope better, you transform. You move from being a character in her story to the author of your own. You stop seeking water from an empty well and learn to find sources of nourishment elsewhere, including, most importantly, within yourself. As one client told me after doing this work, "For the first time in my life, I don't feel responsible for my mother's happiness. I can love her from a distance while taking care of myself." It's like I've been carrying a boulder for decades, and now I can finally put it down. Why? If Jung's insights into narcissistic mothers resonated with you, subscribe and hit the notification bell to join our community of philosophical healers who are breaking generational patterns through deeper understanding. Tell me in the comments, which of Jung's insights hit you the hardest? The empty well, the puppet master, or the distorted archetype? And what aspect of the mother complex would you like me to explore next? Was it the inability to be seen as separate, the conditional love, or perhaps the way her projections shaped your self-image? Remember, understanding why your narcissistic mother can't love you isn't about blaming her. It's about freeing yourself from the impossible task of earning a love that can never be given in the way you need it. As Jung himself said, knowledge of the symbols is the essential basis of our consciousness, and only consciousness is able to recognize meaning. Your path to healing begins with this recognition, and it continues with every step you take toward becoming who you truly are, not who she needed you to be. The mother you needed may not have existed in your childhood, but through the process of individuation, you can become that nurturing presence for yourself. And in doing so, you break the chain of narcissistic wounding that may have extended for generations in your family. This isn't just personal healing, it's generational transformation.